This is Paul Masvidal from Cynic, and you're watching GuitarMessenger.com.
Hi guys, my name is Luke Dennis. I'm with Guitar Messenger. We're sitting here with Paul Masvidal from Cynic. So, Paul, I can speak on behalf of Cynic fans everywhere that I'm very glad it didn't take another 15 years to hear new music from you guys. What inspired the quick turnaround of releasing a new project?
I think we're just in a momentum phase right now. You know, we've been touring. We toured for almost 3 years for Textural, and we've just kind of letting it roll. You know, it feels like that antenna's open now, so we're just adhering to it.
Were you writing a lot while you were touring on Textural, or did you get off the road from the tour and just decide to do it all over again?
I don't write on the road. You know, I write at home, but I'm like pretty much every Cynic record is like a compilation of a lot of existing material because I have a huge library of stuff. I'm always writing when I'm home, so it's kind of like when we're going to make a record, we're looking at what's there and kind of seeing what we want to work on, you know, depending on where our heads are at. And sometimes we're pulling from an idea that's 50% there and we'll try and finish it, or it's some stuff that's very realized already. So it's kind of a best of from the pool, you know, that makes each project or each record, including Textural, you know.
Just from a guitar standpoint, more so than either your past releases, your guitar playing in carbon-based anatomy is much more textural, more so than riff-based, to my ears at least. How do you feel your role as a guitar player influences your role as a composer in the band, and vice versa?
I mean, for me, it's like a guitar is just another tool, you know, and I just like to, whatever the song needs, you know, it's kind of like you're just trying to serve the tune. And for some reason with this particular bunch of recordings, it felt like it needed a lot of little pieces and layers to kind of complete the image, and there was a lot there. And for some reason, I mean, it was funny because after we finished mixing this, I had this fantasy. It was like the next record's going to be like one guitar, you know, and a lot of vocal layers or something, like go the other way. And I say that now, but who knows? But I've always been a fan of textured, layered stuff, you know, and I like that kind of wall of color that isn't as necessarily as definable or riff-based, but more just like one big tapestry that's, you can focus in on certain areas of it, but you're not just like thinking about one riff, you're just thinking about this wall, you know. So that's kind of, I don't know where, you know, the decisions come from really, other than just, it's kind of like you're in a creative process and this is what it feels like it needs. So just, you do it, you know, it's really very much feeling driven versus intellect.
The 15 years you spent between releasing Focus and Textural, you're doing a lot of film scoring work for TV and movies. How did those years influence your writing process when you came back to writing progressive metal?
I think I got better, and Sean and I especially, it was something that, like, I remember, you know, studying some composition and taking composition classes and studying a lot of that stuff, that I was really curious about, like, what emotional state relates to what harmonic kind of thing, like what's the chord progression for this feeling, and then all like the subs of those, like the more specific kind of emotional components. So I think we got better at honing and articulating like environments, you know, and soundscapes, and that somehow lent itself to a sound that was more feeling driven and kind of moody versus just aggression, or, you know what I mean? I don't know, I think that the more you refined your ears get and the more realized you are as an artist or a writer, the better you are at articulating these things that you're feeling. You know, you don't really know where it's coming from, but you can kind of get to it better. You know, you kind of get closer to those capturing that stuff.
Were there specific moods or themes you were really trying to illustrate with carbon-based anatomy that you feel you hadn't explored on the previous two releases?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely a more obvious world music influence coming through. There's probably a stronger ambient kind of Brian Eno thing coming through. I think I was really into a lot of like the world music side of, for example, Pat Metheny, and like his record Secret Story was really huge, and it started with this tune called Above the Treetops. I don't know if you know that record, but that was a huge record for me. And the opening tune, in some ways I was trying to do that with Amidst the Coals. My Amazonian version of it, but taking a traditional kind of piece and building an arrangement around it. There's definitely a lot of other things going on this that I think are different compared to what we've done before. Some incredibly simple moments and then some really kind of diverse, world stuff and more anthemic rock type songs. It's kind of just, we're just exploring, we're just enjoying the process. And
so touching a little more on the world aspect of the new EP, how does that, you mentioned like an Amazonian feel, do you latch on to a specific ethnic music groove, or?
I don't know. I think the Amazonian stuff came from, I was really interested in these Icaros, the shamanic Icaros. A lot of them are coming out of Peru. And it's these, basically these little, almost like indigenous tribes in the Amazon that have this music that they use. They call it, it's actually a form of like geometric harmony and melody where they base this stuff on these things called Icaros, and they have drawings that they do that are like these squiggly lines and kind of fractal-esque looking things that are kind of a form of written Icaros. So they can look at, like, these shaman healer people will look at these things and can sing them, and it's not music, but it's like sound, it's basically they call them heart songs, and they're there to kind of undo knots in your body, places where you're holding, where you're in pain, where you're suffering, and so it's kind of a form of medicine, really. It's a very primitive but yet incredibly sophisticated form of medicine, using sound, and it makes perfect sense to me because of just, in terms of thinking of music as this thing that's related to the spheres, and it's just this universal thing. There's a sound of the planets, so it's all resonating. So they're kind of tuning into that. It just really resonated with me. I had a lot of experiences in the world of shamanism, doing a lot of healing work, and when I heard these tunes, they ripped me open, and I thought, whoa, this. So it seemed like inevitable that I would try and bring it into what we're doing, just because it felt honest at the time. And then of course Bija's more kind of traditional Indian with a Western kind of slant, because the thing that's interesting that's happening with all this stuff is we're tying it all in. There's actually these slender threads throughout the EP that if you're really paying attention, you'll hear everything's connected, even harmonically, but it's very subtle, it's kind of.
How so? Are you giving it away if you?
Well, there's one obvious thing that I've already admitted, which is for example, the piano progression in Bija, that's behind all that sea of like voices and stuff, is the bridge of carbon-based anatomy of the song. So it's the same changes with the same rhythmic figure. So it's like a lot of these like subtle things that unless you're really, familiar with the tunes, you're not going to put it all together. But just little ways of us kind of subconsciously bridging it all, and making it one piece. Because for me, it does feel like one big idea. And then Hieroglyph has a big relationship to Box Up My Bones. And so there's all these things that are tied in there.